Make comments for a couple of minutes here. If you see me looking off screen, I've just got some notes over here, so I want to make sure I'm not getting to those. But first of all, welcome. Excited to have everybody join the session today. I'm Craig Goolsby. I'm the chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine here at Harbor, and appreciate the chance to talk with you all for a couple of minutes. So I just want to talk about very briefly emergency medicine at Harbor, and then I'll turn it over to our amazing education team here and our residents to have a chance to talk with you in much more detail about sort of the things you can do as an applicant, as well as answer questions about our program. So first, it's exciting to have your interest in this because I think emergency medicine is cool. And so I think that, it's cool, the training's cool, and it's really so great because you're going to learn in this career how to save lives. And you're going to be able to do things when minutes matter, where you can use your brains and your hands, and you're going to be able to go into a field where you're going to make that difference between life and death for people. And by the time you get into your training and out in practice, you're going to do this over and over and over again. And so it's such a really amazing thing that we can do. And beyond life-saving, we also get to be with people in their worst moments, whether it's their worst moment personally or something that's happening to a family member, and we can provide comfort and aid them through those really difficult times. And so it's just, for me personally, and I think probably I can speak for our faculty and our residents, it's such an honor to be able to do that kind of work. And so the fact that you're, drawn to it and interested in it's really encouraging. I know we've got the best and brightest in our future generations coming up to do that as well. And of course, if you're going to do it, you might as well consider Harbor, because we are also cool. And so I think the fact that we've got this tremendous history, and in case you don't know, I'm just going to share a few facts here that Harbor is, of course, a level 1 trauma center, level 2 pediatric trauma center, and really serves a unique role as a crucial Department of Health Services, or DHS, safety net hospital in the South Bay of Los Angeles. So if you're not familiar with LA, if you kind of look on the map, the Bay looks like kind of a backward C, and we're sort of tucked into that southern part of it, and we extend inland from quite a ways from there. And this is part of the nation's second largest metropolitan health system, the Department of Health Services. So we've got this really big team that we're a part of, both at the hospital itself, but across the network of hospitals and primary care clinics, et cetera, that make up the Department of Health Services. The DHS mission, I'm just going to read this, is to advance the health of our patients and our communities by providing extraordinary care. And so we get to do a really important part of that in our Department of Emergency Medicine by providing that extraordinary emergency care. And the vision is to be recognized nationally as a model integrated health system. So for those folks who are interested in, thinking about sort of the bigger landscape of healthcare delivery or public health or social medicine or all these different things that go into it, Harbor is really a uniquely positioned place to do that. We have more than 90,000 patient visits a year. We serve a largely underserved population, and really a storied history as one of the nation's first emergency medicine programs. I had the site of the first formal paramedic training program, and a long history and association with EMS and with trauma care, and just like an incredible track record of outstanding faculty contributions, outstanding residency graduations, and residents that have graduated our program, and influential and impactful research. And if you kind of go on and look at sort of like the who's who or big names in emergency medicine, many of those folks are either currently affiliated with Harbor, have been affiliated with Harbor, or Harbor alumni. And so kind of the fingerprints of Harbor on the landscape of emergency medicine are really quite significant. And so for you all, then, of course, we want to talk about our residents. Our residents are amazing. So I see Joyce on screen here, Caesar on screen here. We've got, there may be other folks that I can't see who are off camera right now, but we've got some really terrific folks who are going to do a great job in talking with you about our program. They're exciting. They make it fun to come into work, to be working with teaching them and practicing medicine together. And they really come from all over the country, and we're really fortunate that we have so many terrific people that apply to our program, and we get to have so many great folks join us with a variety of different backgrounds from various places. Our current intern class has 13 of our 16 positions are filled by women, and so we're have a commitment to having a variety of different folks represented in our program, and we really do it all through a culture of teamwork and awesomeness. I think I bored the interns to death this past week. I'm mentioning the word awesome on almost every slide that I worked into talking with them about, but it's really true. We want to do things, and we want to do it well, and we want to be excited about what we're doing. And so I think a lot of that will come through in the work that you can see. So anyway, I think with that, I can turn it back over to Dr. Tannen and Joyce for kind of moving this forward. I don't know if, do you want me to pause for any questions from anyone first? Up to you, Joyce, how you want to run that, or Dr. Tannen.
Yeah, and Ryan just came on too. So I know Joyce has a presentation. I think that would be a good time after she presents for questions. I don't know if you're able to stay on the line for a few minutes, or if Ryan, you want to say a few words as we start.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, because my mic. Okay, cool, great. Yeah, my mic was having some issues. So, hi everyone. It's awesome to meet you. Borrowing one of Craig's terms. I'm Ryan Pedigo. I was a Harbor kind of lifer so far. I've been did residency at Harbor. I was clerkship director for 5 years, an associate residency director for 3 years, and then now the residency program director. It's great to see so many people on this call. And really, this webinar is really for all of you to try to help make your decisions about what kind of program you fit in with, where you want to train, what patient population you want to train with. So please use this time to ask questions either in the chat or afterwards. We can always, we'll have a Q&A session where you can just unmute yourself and chat. Again, you're going to have to decide where to train based on Zoom calls, which is really challenging to do. And so we hope that these webinars can try to give you some insight into our program and our people and our patients, as well as we're going to have a host of different webinars throughout the season, all focusing on different topics. And I hope that that you find all these useful. But you have a lot of representation from, looks like we have a PGY1 here, a PGY2 here, a PGY3 here. And so, we have APDs, vice chairs, the chair. So multiple APDs, Dami just joined. And so, please ask us whatever questions you need to help, make your decisions. And I'll turn it over back to Joyce. Thanks so much for hosting this, Joyce.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Goolsby and Dr. Pedigo, for the introductions. All right, so the kind of basic structure that we've been doing so far is we'll do PowerPoint, kind of get into the nitty-gritty details about the topic. So the topic for today is how to be a successful EM applicant. Afterwards, we'll have kind of a basic panel of our faculty as well as interns, residents, to help answer any and all questions that you have. So throughout the presentation, if you come up with questions and you want to ask then and there, by all means, throw it into the group chat. If you want to kind of save it and ask it in person, kind of on audio, also totally fine. We'll have a dedicated time to do that for the latter half. The presentation itself won't take super duper long. All right, we ready to get started? Woo. All right, cool. So we're going to start and jump right in. So how to be a successful EM applicant. We'll kind of go into a bunch of different portions. Here's the basic timeline or outline for the presentation. Welcome. Okay, so we'll talk about the timeline kind of leading up to the application season, and then we'll go into the application itself, ERAS, personal statement, how to come up with your list of programs, what are different things to consider when you're applying to emergency medicine. We'll talk a little bit about Harbor, but Dr. Goolsby did a fantastic job already giving us an intro, so I'll just lightly touch on that, and then at the end we'll talk about the panel and Q&A. So once again, feel free to type in the chat, or we're also going to have the Q&A at the end. So first off, timeline. So looking at the overall timeline, September 27th is kind of the absolute hard deadline. So that means that ERAS is going to open like September 6th, and you can start submitting your applications. But September 27th is really when programs can start looking at your application. If you submitted your application like September 7th, it's going to look the exact same as someone who submitted September 27th at 11:59, which you should definitely not do. It's going to look the same because that's going to be the timestamp that's marked on the application. That being said, good thing you're here in this webinar. You're starting off early. That's fantastic. So now you can kind of plan ahead for how you want to think about your summer. So a lot of you all are in sub-Is right now or have sub-Is next month, the month after that. Those are going to be one of the most important things you can focus on in this very moment to really, really get those good letter of recommendations, get those flows, make those connections, especially if you're doing away rotations, really talk to the people there. Because EM, you'll find out, is a very small community. everyone knows each other. So figure out those people that are going to be in your corner and really latch onto them. Later in the summer, and then also start kind of brainstorming personal statement things, update your CV, think about like, oh, what did I do as an M1 back in my day? Try to kind of compile all those things. Later on, make your program list, crank out the details. But remember, September 27th is a hard deadline. Make sure you have all of your stuff in, all of your letters, things like that. If you have a sub-I that's happening later, say in October, that's okay. You can always send out an update email to your programs and be like, hey, by the way, my SLO from this program just got submitted. That's okay to get an update email, but make sure everything else is ready to go. Awesome. So let's jump into the actual application itself. There are several components. First off, it's the ERAS, which I had to look up the acronym. It's Electronic Residency Application Service. And then there's your personal statement, which goes along with that. And then the other portions of your application are your MSPE, which is your letter from your medical school, the dean, that includes some of your evals and things. Then you have your letter of recs, which include your SLOs from your sub-I rotations. You're going to have your board scores. Obviously, step one is pass fail. Woohoo, so much better. And then you'll have your grades from all your clinical clerkships if your school still does that. All right, cool. So we got kind of, so we'll move on to ERAS as a whole. So here are, I literally pulled up my old ERAS while I was making this presentation, so I make sure I didn't miss anything. So here are all the components on the ERAS application. First off, contact information. This is the part that makes you feel good that you're like, oh yeah, I'm starting off, I'm writing my application, and you like get through that portion pretty quick. You add your education, which is your undergrad, your med school. Part 3 is like memberships and honorary / professional societies. So for example, if you're a member of EMRA or ASAP or your Gold Human Society, those are the places that you would put that section. Next up, medical school awards. Think back to like anything in medical school. Like if you, for example, gave a research presentation during your first year of med school and they were like, you got a gold star on this. You're like, cool, I could put that on my ERAS. Try and think of literally anything and everything that you could put in there. And also, it's okay if you don't have like crazy awards. It's okay if you don't have any awards. This is just a section that if you do have those things, you can put them in. Certifications. So if you're like BLS certified, ACLS PALS, you can throw those in there. We'll go into more details for activities, publications, and hobbies. And then the last couple sections is language fluency. So you have to put in English, say you're fluent in English, be like, yay, I could do it. And then you could put in some of the other languages if you speak Spanish, Arabic, things like that, and your level of competency. So there's 1, which is native speaker, 2 is advanced, 3 is like basic, and then those are kind of the main levels. So kind of rate yourself on how well you speak that language and be honest about it. And then there's another section for awards, which is for non-med school awards. So if you, for example, I don't know, you finished the Buffalo Wild Wings competition and ate all the wings in 6 minutes and you want to include that on there, that's an option. You don't have to. But think of other awards, maybe things in undergrad, for example, that you were awarded, or if you went abroad somewhere and have other awards, that's the section that would go into. Cool. So let's go into 6, 7, and 8, because those are going to be the bulk of your ERAS application. Okay, activities. So there are 3 main types of ERAS activities that you're going to fit into. So there's volunteer, there's work, and there's research. Those are the big 3 categories. And under each of these categories, they're going to ask you the same general questions. They're going to say, what is the date range in which you participated? Roughly how many hours per week? What was your title / the title of the actual organization? And location, as well as your supervisor. Those are going to be the same for everything. What I did early on in the summer, and things you could do starting from like today, tomorrow, make a spreadsheet and start kind of brainstorming and kind of make it into this, like make your categories like date range, hours per week, title, location, supervisor. So you're starting to kind of think about it, work on it, and then you'll remember, be like, oh yeah, I did that one thing. And then you can add it onto that list. So it's kind of a continuing thing that you could work on your application throughout to kind of make it a little bit more bite-sized into chunks. For volunteer activities, this can be a whole host of things. So it's not just like I worked at a soup kitchen, I worked at a free clinic. Sure, that's your typical volunteer gigs, but think about kind of the clinical committees that you've been on. So if you've been on like clinical liaison committee, for example, and you like worked with the deans to adjust things, or if you helped with the LCME accreditation or anything like that, that still counts as a volunteer thing because you're not getting paid, but you're helping out in a different way. So start thinking about those. Number 2, work. We love seeing people who've done random odd jobs. Like if you've been a bartender, server, or if you've done things like research, tutoring, babysitting, anything you've gotten paid for, these are things that can go in that work section. So obviously people have taken more gap years and have been working for a long time, definitely include it. But even if you've just worked for like a summer or something like that, even if it was a while ago, like between high school and undergrad or during undergrad, make sure to include it because we want to see it. And then the number 3 activities portion is research. This is kind of a little bit more specific. So any type of research projects that you've worked on. The only thing I would say about your activities is some people will be like, should I include stuff from undergrad or not? Should I include stuff from before or not? I say if it is relevant, you can talk about it. I would say include it. Like if it's something that's meaningful to you. If it was like, I volunteered once at a soup kitchen in the middle of my first year of undergrad, maybe not, because that's just going to be fluff and we'll read right through that. But if you have things that are like, oh, I've worked with the Red Cross in high school and college and a little bit and then maybe you didn't do it in med school, but you worked for like 6 years, like that's pretty substantial and you can speak to that experience. So definitely include that in your activities. And also we'll get other people's opinions. This is kind of a little bit more my biased opinion on these, but
can I add a couple things for the activities?
Please,
yeah.
by all means.
So yeah, I totally agree in terms of the timeline on like what you choose to include and what you choose not to include. So in the chat, I put a link to the changes to the 2024 My ERAS application. Are you going to go into that or am I?
No, this is great.
Perfect.
I didn't know they changed it. My bad.
So in prior years, you could have infinity experiences. So, but because that led to challenges in reviewing applications for this upcoming cycle, one new thing is you're going to be limited to 10 experiences and you choose your top 3 most meaningful out of those 10. So you should think like write down all of the stuff that you do and you're gonna, for the experiences, you're gonna have to whittle it down to 10. You can't put more than 10 experiences for this upcoming cycle. And you're going to have to highlight your top 3. So this is a little bit of a change. So in terms of what you're going to put in, obviously it's going to be the 10 most important experiences to you. And if one of those experiences was from undergrad, I would include it if 1, it's super important, or 2, it checks a box that is not checked in medical school. When I say checking a box, I mean, do you have evidence of scholarly activity? Do you have evidence of leadership? Do you have evidence of community service? And if you didn't do one of those in med school, but you did one of those in undergrad, I would strongly consider including it, because when we abstract and like look at things, we're looking for, often programs are looking for some sort of experience in those domains. But now, because of the new limitation, which is present in that link that I put in the chat, you're going to have to be more judicious about what you choose to include and not include. So of those 10 experiences, maybe the Buffalo Wild Wings thing, you probably have to leave out now. So, and back to Joyce.
Thank you. Any other comments on activities? Then we have Tannen and Dami here also who review thousands of applications.
Just when you do it and it's a good thing that they limit it. I think Brad had mentioned sometimes things start becoming meaningless when someone lists so many things, right? So do the things, as Ryan just said, that were important to you, that make you stand out on the application.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, we'll keep going. Okay, publications. So they have it broken down into 3 sections. There's peer-reviewed journal articles / abstracts, poster presentations, and oral presentations. Once again, think back, dig back. undergrad, med school also counts. Pedigo, are there any changes for this upcoming? Now I'm like paranoid that ERAS has all changed.
It's all No, I'm just kidding. You're good on this one. 100% good on this one.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay. Hobbies and interests. So I find this part pretty fun. So I put my example of what I included, but once again, you can just make it personal to yourself and try and be specific if you can. So don't just write like volleyball, say like, what do you like about, or what have you done within volleyball? So I like played in high school, intramural, kind of shows consistency. The second one is very, very specific to me, but I was in a med frat during med school. And so I like lived in like a co-op housing, and there was a lot of like mentees that I had in that house. Traveling in general, you can be specific on like places. If you like have lived in a place for a while, you could put that in here. I, once again, really like spicy food, hence the Buffalo Wild Wings comment. So I just threw that in there. And you'll be surprised. People will actually like actively look at your hobbies and interests, and they'll bring them up on interviews. Don't include anything that's like super weird, I would say. Maybe run it by like a friend, like another EM doc, anyone like that, just to be like, hey, should I include this or not? If you're like on the fence about it, just ask someone. But yeah, any comments on hobbies and interests from anyone in the crowd? Anything you've seen?
The main thing I was going to say is like, yes, be able to speak about anything you list. There would be somebody inevitably that speaks the language that you write there, that like does the same hobby that you included. So if you kind of just put it as like a JK, I'll just see if anybody's reading. We are. So make sure you can speak on it.
Yes. If you say professional rock climber, we will find someone.
Yeah, totally agree. I think often the hobbies are really great because I would say many interviewers tend to use that as the icebreaker, to try to just like, and what we do at our program is we actually match people with similar interests, whether it be academic interests or like personal interests. So if there's, another unofficial house mom, then maybe we'll pair you with that interviewer. And so I definitely put your, like non-weird, like Joyce said, hobbies and interests.
And it can also include like books you've read. Like I put the Harry Potter series, or going to the gym, hiking, stuff like that.
Great. Thank you all. All right. Okay, moving on to the personal statement. So basically a personal statement should go into what makes you you. So we want to hear about your background, your journey to medicine. There's a specific impactful patient experience. We want to hear about it, like why EM in particular is also not just the broader medicine sense, but EM in particular, if you can make it a little bit more specific. The absolute biggest mistake that we see again and again is people just regurgitating what's exactly on their CV. We have a fat packet on what's on your CV already. Like you already put time and effort into your activities. We want to have something that supplements your overall application. If you want to go into like one specific activity and there was an impactful experience in there, by all means, but don't just like list from the date of this to this, I did X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, we already have that. We want something specific. Some structures that some people have done in the past that can work out is if you talk about broadly, like what characteristics make a good EM doc and then you can show how you embody those, not just listing them. Be like, I'm empathetic. Be like, okay, show me a story on how you're empathetic and how that's relevant to EM. Some people will talk about kind of like personal, family, or friend stories that made them decide EM or medicine as a whole. So those are just a couple structures, but once again, just kind of brainstorm what works for you. Talking to like counselors and things like that could also be good. If you have a friend that's really good at writing, also having them like interview you, or journalism, like it's great because then they can bounce ideas, they can find threads. The length is about 1 page single spaced, unless that has changed. And then in terms of editing, so I thought this was kind of interesting. So a lot of people are like, oh yeah, send it to everyone, but you're going to get a lot of conflicting opinions about your personal statement, and that might leave you more distraught. So I would kind of like lump it into 3 categories. Pick someone that is in medicine / knows medicine and residency applications that can look at your personal statement and kind of vet it for you to make sure that it includes all the components it should have. And then have maybe like a close friend or family member look at it, someone who knows you well, who can kind of speak to some of your experiences and like help with that. And then the last person that should look at your personal statement is like someone who's a grammar freak, someone who's going to just like rip it apart, make sure the periods are correct, all of the spelling is absolutely flawless. You need that person to be kind of like dead last just to like finalize everything before you send it out. Cool. So kind of like 3 sets of editing, I would say. Common questions we get about personal statements is, 1, do I need to personalize my personal statement to every program? I personally think this is definitely not necessary. Like, you only have 1 page. So if your entire personal statement fits on 1 page, you have no extra room. We don't want you going over. I know some people who are like, okay, maybe I'll personalize it to 1 or 2 programs that I really love. And I'm like, okay, sure, if you want, but it's a lot of work and you got to make sure 100% the personal statement you are attaching matches the program you are applying to. Because I have heard horror stories of someone saying like, yes, I would love to be in Oregon, and then like send it to Washington, or like Washington University St. Louis and University of Washington are 2 different programs. So don't be that person. How good does my
just along those same lines, since we get it often, we are not Harborview and we are also not UCLA. So if you were personalizing your personal statement and wrote either of those, it would look bad. So I want to just reiterate what Joyce said. I don't think you need to personalize your statement for every program, but I had mentioned before that the types of programs that you're interested in, you definitely want to do your homework and know what they're interested in. So, like if you're a basic science researcher and you're applying to places that have the best basic science, write your personal statement about how basic science has changed your life and what you've already done. I could tell you that's not what we're about. So if I got that, I might be like, well, this might not be the best place for them. We do a lot of research, but like if you're like a basic science researcher, so you do want to do your homework and know where you're applying. Usually people do group them together so they know what types of places, whether it's a county academic place, if it's a community place, if it's we say quaternary care place. So just a little bit on that.
We'll go into different programs and things too, but yeah, thank you. That's such a good point. Other comments about personal statements from the crew?
Oh, I just want to say, like, personal statements, it's hard to hurt yourself. We read lots of personal statements, lots of them. I've read probably over 10,000 in my life. I would say that 9,250 all said that some incident happened when they were a kid to some family member and how this changed their life and how they wanted to be a doctor. And I don't remember any of them except that they fit that pattern. So if you want to break out of that pattern, be the 10% that people may remember, or be the file that we want to meet you because of your personal statement, just think about that.
Yeah, I guess I would add, I've probably read 5,000 personal statements, so not quite at the David Tennant level of personal statementhood. However, people stress when it gets time to apply about personal statements because it's the last thing that they have control over. Your board scores are your board scores, your experiences are your experiences, right? And your slows are your slows. And now they're like, oh, this personal statement, right? But David's right. I think over 90% of the time, the personal statement does not change our decision. However, it is an important section if you have what you might perceive to be like a red flag on your application, because that's the only time when we can have a conversation about it before an interview decision. It's not really a conversation, very one-sided conversation. Maybe an explanation is a better term. So if you have something that absolutely must be addressed, you failed a bunch of preclinical courses or something, like that's something that if I don't see that addressed, then I'm gonna be like, man, like what happened? Like, is there something I should be really worried about? So that is one spot where if you have a red flag, you can address it head on and explain it. So that way we understand kind of the underpinnings of why that happened to your application. Other than that, though, it's rare that a personal statement will like drastically change our decision, but it does happen a few times per application cycle.
Great. Thank you so much. That's a fantastic point. Definitely address your red flags. Like, this is your opportunity. Like, some people have like a rough going of it. If you have a family member that's sick and you were taking care of them and that's why X, Y, and Z happened, please tell us. Like, we want to know. We do holistic review. So definitely please let us know. Can kind of along those lines. People remember the top 10%, that might be the ones that change it, but if it's really, really terrible personal statement, they'll also remember that, and that's not great either. So if you're like that middle 80%, you're chilling. Like, I suck at writing. I like really struggle with my personal statement. At the end of the day, people just kept reminding me, they're like, it's okay. If it's, as long as it's good enough, like it'll be fine. So don't stress too much, but try your best on it. Cool. Any other comments about personal statements from the crowd? Awesome.
And just a quick thing, keep it to about 4 paragraphs, 1 page. If it goes longer, you're a standout one way or the other. So try to keep it to about 4 paragraphs.
Perfect. All right, great. So that's kind of the overall overview of the application, ERAS personal statement. So now let's go into the specifics of different programs. Okay, cool. So when you're making your program list, a few different things are important, and we'll break it down. One is going to be location, 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 location. You're going to hear this a million times over. Location, location, location is important. We'll talk about how to make a good like location list and what to do for that. The different types of program, Dr. Tanner already talked about this a little bit, academic versus community versus county, 3-year programs versus 4-year programs, where do graduates go, and also other details, other deets. Okay, cool.
I'll jump in super quick on this because this is another 2024 My ERAS thing. Is now you can actually share your geographic preferences with programs. And so you can actually share if you wish, like, I want to be on the West Coast, which before you couldn't do, but we kind of like surmised it based on your hometown, based on where you rotated. A common thing though that people kind of worry about before this geographic signaling is like, oh man, I've never lived in California. Is that like going to hurt my application? Is that like weird? Will it be looked at funny? No. Like the only red flag geographically for us is if you're like been hyper local your whole life, because then we're like, okay, what is the chance that you're going to leave your area, right? But if you're not like hyper local and your whole life's not within like a 30-mile square radius or whatever of where you grew up, that's not a red flag at all, because it might be a red flag to places in like less favorable geographic locations, right? They'll be like, oh, do you really want to go to, and I don't want to offend anyone, so I'm not going to say a place that I think is geographically not as cool as Southern California, but that's literally everywhere. But like, if I was like, if I looked at an applicant and was like, does this person want to live like 2 blocks from the beach and have it be 75 degrees year round? You can play volleyball after conference. Like you can wear a t-shirt and jeans, like 24/7, 365. Like, honestly, yeah, that's fine. Like, I don't think that's going to be like, it's not going to be like a deal breaker if you've never lived in California.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Yeah, so there's a good website that EMRA has. We have it over here. If you just type in like EMRA match, EMRA map, it should pop up. And it's cool because you can actually click on it and it's shows you specific programs within. So here's what the map looks like. Processing, please wait. You can filter it out based on program length, but by primary training site, if you have specific locations, and then you can add it to a favorite list. So look, there's 286 programs. So, oh, well, I'm interested in Southern California. Let's see what's down here. Wow, cool. How about LA? Oh, there's 4 programs in LA. Very cool. Look, wow, Harbor UCLA. Oh, cool. 4-year program. Awesome. So it's cool. It's an easy way to kind of like pick and choose. So since location is also so important, this is a good place to start being like, oh, like here are other programs. Say you have family in like New Mexico and you're like, I wonder what programs are in New Mexico. And then you can zoom into that and then look a little bit deeper. So definitely a good resource to start kind of looking at what different programs you would like to look into. Okay, cool. So that's location. Next, kind of the types of programs. So this is a little bit more specific to, I would say EM has a really big emphasis on like the different types of program, because your day-to-day on shift is going to vary drastically depending on what type of program you go into. So we are a county site. So we're typically in an urban settings. You're going to have a large underserved immigrant population, underserved population in general, people who are experiencing homelessness, drug use, things like that. Tends to be a little bit more culturally diverse. And sometimes there's more traumas in county settings. Versus the other type of program is going to be like an academic site. So that's going to be like your classic academic center, usually what medical schools are linked to, your like UCLA, your quote unquote ivory towers. You're going to have tons and tons of specialists at your disposal. You'll have a larger exposure to rare diseases and greater exposure to more basic science research. And then you'll also tend to have a lot more specialty residents in-house. So that means that you're going to be calling consultants a lot more because it's like, oh, there's this person with this very specific renal transplant, something, something, and there's 3 in the world. Like, I don't know, is the ER doc like, I have no idea. Let me call the renal transplant. They're going to be like, please order like these very specific labs. And you're like, okay, I'm going to order them. So you're going to be on the phone a lot more calling consultants, but you'll see like more rare diseases. And then there's community practice. So there's typically less specialty coverage in a community site. And it's like a lot more like get through patients, go a lot faster. Tends to be a little bit more of an insured patient population as opposed to county. A little bit more diversity in ages possibly. And then there's quote unquote what's called unopposed residencies, which means like in the entire hospital, there might only be like an EM residency or EM and one other thing. So you're kind of the go-to person if for like procedures and other things, because the attendings are kind of like, you could do it. And so then they'll be more likely to supervise you versus if there's a place with lots and lots of residents, like an academic site, you might have to like nudge shoulders a little bit to be like, hey, I want this procedure. Hey, I want this. Comments from the crowd about different types of programs and things to consider.
Yeah, this part's super important, I think. When you look at like places to rotate, I would try to see what if you have a home institution program or programs and you still have time to do an away, then I would make sure that you're kind of covering the spread of these types of programs, because if you apply to our program and you have 0 county experience and like no like history of working with underserved populations and stuff, we might just wonder if we're a good fit for you. Because like we want you to be happy where you match, right? And you're going to have a Zoom call with us and we're going to talk about the program. But it's super important that you have an understanding of which of these types of programs is the best fit for like your life and like your idea of like what type of training you want to get, because we want to be a good fit for you, just, you know, and so by trying to make sure that you have some sort of experience with each of these types of programs will really help you in making your decisions on what type of training environment you want to be in.
Yeah, and to add on to that, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to do a full-on sub-I rotation with these different types of sites, but even if you could do like an ultrasound rotation or like a short 2-week rotation, just so you get exposure and you also get your name out there with these different programs. So that's great. A lot of programs you'll find are actually a fusion, or they might have like different rotations within it. So for example, we're primarily county site. However, we do rotate at like a community ER, and we do rotate through like Cedars-Sinai's MICU, for example. So we get exposure to different sites, but our primary site is county. Some places like NYP Cornell Columbia, UW, Denver, they're like almost, and UCLA, purely 50-50 split almost with academic and county. Having a split site has its pros and cons as well. You'll have to kind of like commute if you go split site, but you get exposure to both, versus if you have one primary site, you can live close by, and then you get really tight with every single person there, from like the techs to the nurses to all the consulting residents. So it's really nice to have that one centralized community versus kind of being a little bit more split. You're splitting your time so you get less exposure, so it's less of a family feel. So there's pluses and minuses to having a split site versus one site. And most programs will have like a little bit of community mixed in if it's not already explicitly done. Cool. All right, 3 versus 4-year program. So this is also a very big split to figure out whether or not you want to do 3-year, 4-year, or apply to both. Most people will just kind of apply to both and decide later because your interests may change with time. 3-year programs tend to be like more EM all the way through, get you out. And then people in 3-year programs tend to go to more like community-like jobs. People in 4-year programs tend to have a little bit more options in terms of fellowship and what they want to do later on. Once again, I'm also a little bit biased. Like I chose a 4-year program on purpose because I felt like that's what I needed and that's what would open the most doors for me personally. A lot of the big county sites are also all 4-year programs now. So we're 4 years, LAC, USC, or now it's called LAG, LA General Hospital, Highland Hospital, Denver, all of these programs are now 4 years. So if you're interested in a county program, chances are it's going to be a 4-year. So it kind of just depends on what your priorities are. Comments from the crowds for 3 versus 4 year. It's a big topic as well.
It's a huge topic. I will say that one of the things is if you're going to go into fellowship, right? One of the challenges with training at a 3-year program is if you decide you want to do a fellowship, right, then you usually cannot go straight into fellowship at a 4-year program because almost every fellowship has attending level responsibilities, like supervisory resident responsibilities. And nobody really wants, just from the optics, a PGY4 fellow supervising a PGY4 resident, right? And so, you know, I was the last of the 3-year program at Harbor before it transitioned to a 4-year. And I had faculty offers at other sites in LA. And they were just like, yeah, but you like can't supervise residents for your first year. And so I was like, I mean, it would have been workable. It just would have been a little bit awkward. But that doesn't mean if you go to a 3-year program, you could always still build your niche in emergency medicine. And then if you want to do fellowship at a 4-year program, you would likely just have to do a year of something else. So just, you know, like per dieming at some emergency departments or something during the interim, which is also completely and totally fine.
I was just going to add quickly that if you knew that you want to do PDM or if you knew you want to do tox, some people factor that in and they say, well, I'm going to do my 3 years and then I'm going to do 2 more years of PDM or tox for a total combined of 5 years rather than 6 years. So that may play into the equation too.
And personally, like I went for a 4-year versus a 3-year just because it gives me more elective time, you know, and more opportunity to explore any interests that I have, whether it's like critical care or ultrasound, social EM, stuff like that. Versus the 3-year, I felt like everything would have been really truncated and just I would have been short for time and kind of trying to squeeze everything all in 3 versus 4.
Yeah, you definitely get a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more selective time to kind of mix and match with a 4-year program. But it is an extra year. You've already gotten 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of med school, plus some gap years. Like it kind of depends on like where your life's going, where you want it to go. Any other comments about 3 versus 4-year programs? Great. Okay, the other thing that you should definitely look into is where do the graduates of X residency go? If you find that everyone from that program, 100% of the people are all getting community jobs and you're interested in fellowship, that might not be the best place for you to go because they don't necessarily have as many connections. Versus if you find a program that it's like a little bit of fellowship, a little bit of community jobs, a little bit of academic jobs, then you know that you have kind of like a mix and match that you can pull from. Which is great. And then also when you go to these big conferences, take a look at like their alumni networks and things like that, because that'll also definitely help you in the future. So if someone graduated from Harbor and they work at X place, say I'm interested in going to Montana, I don't know, randomly thought of the state. And I was like, oh, who do I know in Montana? Oh, Rob McMickle. He recently graduated from Harbor UCLA. He would be a great connection. Same thing with Utah. Be like, oh, Alexa Golden, fantastic. So it's nice to have kind of connections and know people that are going across the country versus if you know you want to stay kind of local in LA, tons of connections, tons of hospitals in LA. So that definitely opens your doors up. Any comments on this slide from the crew? Great. So just look at where graduates go. Okay. Next up, details. So other big things to consider when you're coming up with your list. One, some people don't like this term, but like work-life balance. Honestly, the way that I kind of look at it is look how the residents are. Do they seem legitimately happy? There were definitely some places I interviewed at where you like look at the residents like in the eyes and you're like, who hurt you? Like, you do not look like you're having a good time. I'm so sorry. And it's like kind of obvious, like obviously on Zoom, it's like a little bit hard because you're trying to make these decisions, but my class was the first class to do the whole Zoom interview thing. And you can figure out a lot just by watching kind of well, people and their like souls by looking into their eyes, but also like their interactions with each other. Like, do they genuinely like each other? Are they like, do they hang out outside of work? Like, do they seem like they're having a good time? Things like that, you can definitely tell over Zoom, and also social media accounts and things like that. Residency culture. So this is definitely something that's a little bit harder to suss out, but questions that you can ask on your interviews. And we have another session on interview tips a little bit later, so we can go into more details. But asking people like, what is your sign out culture like? Like, for example, at Harbor, like say I had a busy shift and there's like a couple laceration repairs or like a paracentesis that I didn't quite get to on my shift. It is the culture at Harbor that we back each other up, we help each other up. Someone's coming on to shift, be like, no, I'll take that procedure from you. Like, please go home. Like, how can I get you out of here? It's that like collegial experience that people are looking out for each other and really have each other's backs. Like if something gets busy on the adult side and the pediatric side is a little bit more chill, you'll find people will step up and they legitimately want to help you and like figure out different ways. And it's a beautiful thing. All right. Another thing to look into is like number of residents per class. If you are interested in a really big program, by all means, find programs that are a little bit larger. So I would say like middle to larger of a program. We have 16 residents per class across 4 years. So we're a little bit on the larger side. The largest I've heard is like 25 per year for 4 years. So that's like 100 residents. And then the smallest I've heard is like maybe like 3 or 4 per year. The benefits to having a little bit larger of a residency class is 1, you can find more people to cover your shift. 2, chances are you're going to find other people with similar interests. It's a really large class. Chances are you're not going to like be like buddy with every single person in the class. But as long as you can find those people that you're like tighter with, it's nice to have kind of like the smaller groups within the larger groups. But the other thing is you don't want it to be like too big where you feel like you're like, oh, I don't know the people in my class. Like, oh, what's that guy's name again? So I think there's like a delicate balance where it has that nice family feel where you know everyone in your class and know everyone in your residency. But at the same time, there's enough people that you'll always find someone that to hang out with in a sense, and people that take shifts. So it's a nice little balance. Fellowship and scholarly tracks. So different programs will have different things set up with like electives, selectives, especially 4-year programs. Compensation. We're residents. This is like the least amount of money we're going to make in our lives. So it's all temporary at the end of the day. For Harbor in particular, we are part of, we're LA County employees. So we're actually under the same contract as LACUSC/LAG. And so it's, we just had like a recent contract change and we were able to kind of rally and like unionize to get a larger increase in pay, as well as like housing stipends and things like that. So definitely look into the details of not only like how much you're getting paid, but also, oh, what other stipends are there? Are there educational stipends, housing stipends, other ways to supplement it? Because you'll find like a place in like in LA, definitely you're going to need a housing stipend. So we get 10K, which is fabulous. Versus like if you're in the middle of the Midwest, housing's a lot cheaper. They might not offer that housing stipend. Also meals, for example, like we get free meals at our hospital. A lot of hospitals don't necessarily offer that. So that's other kind of like little details to look into. None of this should sway your decision to go to a program or not. Be like, yeah, they got like 3 meals a day. Like I'm gonna go there because of that. But it should kind of be the global picture. Be like, do they actually legitimately care about their residents? Do they look into helping and supporting their residents? Are there avenues to get help if you need it? Are there avenues for change? All of these things kind of play into the overall culture that you should be trying to tease out. There's going to be a big difference between newer versus established residencies. So we're one of the oldest residencies. We were established in the 70s versus some of these newer programs. Some of them have only been around for like a year or two. So you might not have a larger enough alumni network. You might not have you might not have all 3 or 4 years of residents that are currently there. So kind of looking into that. Competitiveness, reputation, whatever that means. There's always like these weird like ranking systems. It kind of reminds me of like the US news ranking systems. Take it all with a grain of salt. Like these things change on a regular basis. Like who knows who's running it and what they're inputting into it. So take it with a grain of salt. Any other thoughts on like the program list or details, things like that?
I will say, unlike a lot of what like your medical life has been, like a lot of times we learn like, oh, you want to go to the top school, top medical school, top college. Residency is kind of the polar opposite for that, because if you go to the top place and you're miserable, it's a job and you're going to be miserable at your job for 4 or 3 years, right? This is where the field becomes a really big deal. And we say that and you guys will be like, no, they're just saying that because they're through it. It really is a big deal. It, literally, if you hate your coworkers, you will hate your job and you will change residencies to the one that wasn't top ranked, but you enjoyed more. So just keep it in mind when you're, excuse me, when you're putting that program list together in your application.
Great. Thanks, Dami. Okay, how many programs to apply to? So before we go into the slide, 100%, this should all be very, very individualized to you as an applicant. Talk to your faculty members, talk to your clerkship directors, talk to other residents to figure out for your specific application, what is a good number of programs to apply to. And try to do this a little bit earlier on if you can. I made the mistake of like not talking to everyone and then talking to only other people who are applying EM, and I got freaked out and I like applied to way too many programs and spent way too much money. Like, we know you're broke, it's fine. So this is kind of like a general list. This is like, I like hesitated even putting this slide up just because a lot of people have like wide ranges, and it also depends on where you're applying to exactly. So if you're trying to be specifically in like Southern California, then apply to all the programs in Southern California. You want to like optimize your chances. But if you're going to somewhere that's not as competitive, for example, or you want to go into like a general area and you're more relaxed on what programs you want, then maybe you could apply to less. So kind of take everything with a grain of salt here. But this is just general guidelines. Yeah, once again, talk to specific counselors. They're going to be able to help you the most. How competitive is EM? So as we've seen the last 2-3 years, it changes all the time. So my year was in 2021 was like the most competitive. There were like 7 unfilled spots. They're like, oh, EM is on the rise. And then there was this like article that came out that's like, we're going to be all out of the job, and people freaked out. And then this past year there was 555 unfilled slots. So next year, who knows? Who knows exactly how competitive it's going to be? I would just say, like, once again, try your best, do what you can. EM, I would say, is like probably like mid-tier competitiveness. It's not like a derm or radiology, but it's not like a family med or peds. So we're kind of in the middle for how competitive it is. Okay, cool. Any questions about program list, how to make your program list, anything along those lines? Looks like we only have like 6 minutes left. So I'll go through these last slides real quick, and then we're going to go into questions. Okay, once again, in LA, there's 3 different programs. There's LA County General, there's LAC Harbor UCLA, which is us. LA County is the LAC portion of it. And there's LA County General, which was formerly LAC USC. So they're located kind of up here. We're down here. And then there's UCLA, which is one of those split county plus academic sites that we talked about before. And they're kind of located up here somewhere. Cool. And then we're a level 1 trauma center, all this stuff. We're a largely underserved patient population. So if you're like, hell yeah, I want to work with lots of like immigrants, I want to work with people who speak Spanish, I want to work with Black patients, we've got it all. And a lot of our patients have limited English proficiency. So if you speak Spanish, we need you. We need people who speak Spanish. But we also have interpreters and things to help, but we need people who speak Spanish. And the last section is just, these are the rest of our sessions that we're going to do. So we had how to succeed in your sub-I. This session was about how to be a successful EM applicant. If you are on our email list, you got an email from me this past week, then you don't need to scan this QR code. If you got the Zoom link from someone else and you're not on our email list but want to be, feel free to scan this QR code or send us an email directly. We have 3 more sessions coming up. Mark your calendars. They're all Wednesdays between 5 and 6. Usually like the 1st or 2nd week. So August 9th, we're going to do a session on social EM and DEI at Harbor. September 6th, we'll do a why Harbor UCLA, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty details on that. And then October 4th, we'll go into interview tips. All right. Questions, comments, complaints, concerns, anything of the sort. We got like 4 minutes to be respectful of people's time. Hopefully this will,
So it looks like Lauren asked about applying from a school without a home EM program or if it changes the picture at all. Honestly, the biggest downside to that is just financial, right? You don't have like a freebie place to rotate. And so we understand that away rotations cost a lot of money. So, you should probably do 2 aways if you don't have a home EM sub-internship. Where those 2 aways are probably should span some combination of county, community and academic, just so that way you understand your training program like preferences. And I will say that rotating somewhere is the biggest way to change your position on that institution's rank list. And so if there's a place that you're specifically interested in, that I would definitely like heavily consider it if your application's a good fit for that program. That way, if you crush your rotation, you'll be ranked very highly because you're a known entity, right? So it's someone we've spent a month with versus someone we've spent 6 hours on a Zoom call with, and that can be really powerful. And then it looks like Umar has a question about slows. So in terms of applications, if you have an incomplete application, usually what happens is we'll just mark it as incomplete and we'll come back and see it. As long as it's not too delayed, that should be okay. The challenge is if it's so delayed that we've already given out 90% of our interview slots, then you're applying into a program where we're reviewing your file, and out of the 100 people we're going to interview, we've sent out 90 invites. That does make it really challenging, but mid-October should be okay. The later it is, I would consider reaching out because we're going to get 1,000+ applications, and it's hard to know if someone has a new step 2 score, a new slow. So it's totally reasonable if I wouldn't do it like the day after the application opens, right? But if it's later in the season, it's totally fine to reach out and be like, hey, I'm really interested in your program for these reasons, and I have a new piece of data to support my application, whether it's a new slow, a new step 2 CK score. Sometimes it's less effective to reach out if you don't have that and statement, like and new data for us, because then we've already reviewed your file, and we may or may not make a different decision. Others, you can hear my 3-year-old screaming in the background.
also feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question too. We have like a couple minutes left.
And definitely write to us if you have questions.
Yes. I'll put the email one more time. It's just harboremdei@gmail.com. Please send any emails you have to us. We can also kind of funnel it in if you have like a specific question, like, oh, I have a question about, I don't know, like the food pharmacy or something. Then we can get you connected to people who are involved with different parts of the organization. Great. Thank you all so much for being here. Really appreciate it, and hope to see you all at the next webinar. Feel free to spread the word to your EM interest groups and anybody that's applying EM, honestly, that we're going to have these sessions kind of on a monthly basis. But thanks again for joining. Appreciate it. Have a lovely Wednesday afternoon.